Welcome, everyone. Delighted for such a big turnout. This is actually the first day of the real estate colloquium class. And as the students all know, meets every Friday. 2-credit class that involves a mix of Notre Dame undergraduates who are in the real estate minor, law students who are interested in real estate, and students from the MBA program at Mendoza. In addition, this is the first of our Fire Football Fridays. So each Friday, both of the class and of the home football schedule, we have one or more distinguished speakers from the real estate industry who come in and give all of the students and other audience members a sense of what's going on in the real estate industry. What are the hot topics? What are the potential career paths for students who might want to do internships or full-time positions? And why real estate, as the world's largest asset class, is so important, both financially and to the global economy, but also to all of our lives, socially, where we live, housing, where we work, office buildings, where we play, Notre Dame Stadium for the victory this weekend. So super happy that all of you are taking this class, have joined us. Special shout out to those joining us via Zoom. We're just gonna spend the first 5 or 10 minutes for the students in the class, introducing ourselves, both myself, Professor Dan Kelly, and my co-teacher, Professor Mike O'Malley. So today you not only get 2 professors, but you get 2 super industry speakers in Larissa Herczeg and Fitzgerald. So first 5 or 10 minutes, just want to make sure all the students understand sort of the class and the format, and then we'll launch into the main event. So I'm Professor Dan Kelly. I'm a professor here at Notre Dame Law School. I also serve as the faculty director for the Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate and the director of the Law and Economics program here at the law school. I'm joined by my friend and new colleague who's now joined Notre Dame on a full-time basis, Mike O'Malley. Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, good to see everybody here. Mike O'Malley. I am the executive director of the Fitzgerald Institute. It's a new role. I'm very excited about it. I'm also a full-time professor of the practice. I met some of you guys previously. I was an adjunct professor for a couple of years as I was kind of finishing my career at a private equity firm that I was a partner at in Austin, Texas, called Pennybacker Capital. So what happened is Dan invited me up here to start teaching. I kind of really started enjoying it. I went here, graduated in '96, which seems like forever ago to you guys, but it really wasn't that long ago. And decided this is what I want to do for the next chapter of my career. So excited to be here, excited to teach this class. In my second year teaching this class. We're gonna have a great semester. We have a lot of exciting speakers, and particularly on Football Fridays, we realize that we're usually the last thing between you guys and your football weekend. So we'll promise to make it engaging.
So thanks, Mike. And two things about that. On Football Fridays, and this is for everybody, both the students, alumni, parents, and friends, we're starting a new tradition this year of after class, instead of everybody or the students coming up to talk to the speakers, we're actually going to do an informal, casual reception right outside. This one will be outside the doors to the law school here, right on DeBartolo Quad. So it's just a chance for anybody who wants to stick around to talk to the speakers, talk to each other, for alumni to reconnect and to connect with students. So that's sort of the start of the football weekend after the class is we're going to have the informal gathering, which we'll do for a number of the courses. One note I want to give to the students is Professor O'Malley and I are super pumped up about real estate. Most of the speakers, all of the speakers, hopefully, that we have come through are super pumped up about real estate. What we want to instill in you is a desire to learn more. We know you have a lot of options, whether you're an undergrad student still discerning your path, whether you're a law student figuring out what practice area to go into, whether you're an MBA student looking to see what's the next pivot in your career. We just want to say real estate is one of those options. And here's all the different career paths and concepts in real estate to kind of arm you with that tool chest if you choose to discern a vocation and a career in real estate. We think it's awesome. We hope, by the end of the semester that you'll catch that fire, that spark, but that's the goal. That being said, we know everybody is coming in from different perspectives and different levels of understanding of real estate. So whether you're a sophomore starting out in the real estate minor, whether you're a second-year law student, first-year MBA student, it doesn't matter. And what it means is we want all of you to participate and engage with us and the speakers. So ask questions. Right? If you don't understand something, if somebody's using terminology that may seem second nature to them, like limited partner, general partner, and you're like, what is that? That's what I would have been, both as an undergraduate and actually as a law student for quite a while. Ask a law student, well, what does that mean if it's a legal term? Ask one of us, right? Even today, the topic of real estate, private equity, entrepreneurship, if you're like, what is private equity? That's a perfectly okay question. That's what school is all about. It's an opportunity to learn, right? So there's no question in here that's too basic about real estate or anything else to ask. So just briefly, course overview, objectives and expectations for all of you. Each Friday, we expect you to come to class, have done any of the reading. You have response papers that you turn in for 5 of the 10 speakers. And you all know about that through Canvas and the syllabus. We really want you to engage, right? We don't want you to be on your computer playing solitaire. Sorry if anybody is right now, right? We want you to engage. These are world-class speakers. It's class meets once a week. And by engaging, it's paying attention, it's asking questions, it's figuring out, okay, what has this person said and what do I agree with or disagree with? We want you to disagree with these speakers, right? What they say is not necessarily on the 10 Commandments. You want to be an entrepreneur as a student. Right? You want to be thinking, this is the time to do that. So that's the main thing is we want you to engage. A few things, these are the goals of the class. We want to build a foundation, right? Again, what are the basic terms, concepts, insights? We want you to start to learn the vocabulary of real estate. Engage with the materials and the speakers. Expand your horizons. So think creatively, right? Maybe there's a business idea out there that one of the speakers alludes to that you think is worth pursuing. Keep thinking about it in class and outside of class. Think about your future. There's a lot of different career paths in real estate and related fields, and hopefully you'll get to see a diversity of speakers illustrate those for you. And last but not least, act with integrity, right? So obviously, Notre Dame Honor Code, treat everybody with respect, no plagiarism. There's a new one this year, no AI or ChatGPT. We actually want real response papers. Not AA response papers. And last but not least, have fun in class. So that's it. It's pretty simple. We'll launch into it, get started. I'm going to turn over to Professor O'Malley, who's going to introduce today's speakers. Thanks everybody for coming.
All right, thanks, Dan. I just want to echo what Dan said. Look, I spent 4 years at Notre Dame not engaging with guest speakers. We had amazing guest speakers come in even back in the Stone Ages when I was here. And I just didn't engage. I got out of the real world and I was like, holy cow, I wish I would have actually taken the time to really engage. So these folks are here for your benefit. Let's have fun with it. Let's enjoy it. And to the extent that there's, as Dan said, if there's any questions you all have that you want answered, ask it in class. If you don't want to ask it in class, feel free to shoot an email to either one of us. We've both got defined office hours. We're happy to explain any concepts. Really excited to get started today. In particular, our first guest lecturer is Larissa Herczeg, also a class of '96, classmate of mine. We've known each other for about 30 years, and she's one of my favorite speakers to come to any class I teach at Notre Dame because she has a lot of opinions. And she has opinions on real estate. She has opinions on private equity. She has opinions on the Notre Dame football team. She has opinions on the second string safety and whether, he should be playing cover 2 or doing something different. So Larissa's got a fantastic knowledge base. But most importantly, she is an entrepreneur. She is a managing partner and the CIO of the Seeding and Strategic Capital platform at one of the largest real estate firms in the United States called Blue Owl Real Estate. And I'm going to have Larissa explain what Seeding and Strategic Capital is in just a second. Prior to that, she worked at some of the largest firms in the real estate space, Morgan Creek Capital, Credit Suisse. Prior to that, she was a lawyer. She was a Clifford Chance, not doing real estate at all. So Larissa, like many of us in this industry, found her way into real estate without taking a single real estate class. My joke is Larissa was a government and economics and PPE major at Notre Dame. I don't think she had Excel installed on her computer when she was at Notre Dame. But I love it. She is a tremendous asset in this industry. She's a leader in this industry. And before we go on, Larissa, can you explain maybe what Seeding and Strategic Capital is? Because I know I'll stumble over it as well.
Yeah, and are we going to stand up? So Seeding and Strategic Capital, exactly what it sounds like when entrepreneurs go to start firms, we will help put them in business. So we will help write a check to be their first institutional investor and really get them off the ground in exchange for a small ownership piece in their firm so that we're aligned to help them grow. And so Mike got off easy because we had just started this concept when Penny Backer launched, but we were their first investor. We were a very early investor with Exeter as well.
Yeah, and that is true. Larissa was literally our first institutional investor. She says we got off easy. I'm not so sure, but fantastic partner.
Also, as a point of trivia, I went to the same high school as Sam Zell, which was also the same high school as John Gray, and then also the same high school as Neil Bloom, who's probably old enough that you guys might not know who he is, but he started Walton Street and JMB back in the day.
It's like a real estate mecca.
I know, real estate mecca at my high school. Who knew? I did not know until John Gray told me like 10 years ago. It's like, oh, growing up in Highland Park, didn't you always want to go into real estate? What are you even talking about?
So you've seen Larissa's, some of you guys might have seen the advertisements for this event in LaFortune and Duncan and Morrison and things like that. Larissa wanted to bring a friend. And so she invited Ward Fitzgerald to join us. And I'm so excited to have Ward here. Ward is the founder and CEO of EQT Exeter. He's an '85 grad of Notre Dame. And oh, by the way, you're all part of the Fitzgerald Institute of Real Estate. That's him. So Ward, thank you for being here. And maybe you can talk a little bit about EQT Exeter and who you guys are.
Sure. Well, it's great to be Larissa's guest, and I'm honored to be so. And I mean that wholeheartedly. EQ Exeter is a firm that basically is a major private equity and investment firm around the globe, very similar to what I'd call some of the most popular names that have already been mentioned, but you'll continue to hear about and you all know about, like a Blackstone or a Starwood or an Ares or a Blue Owl. There are three major divisions to the company. One is in buyout, private equity, one is in infrastructure investing, and one is in real estate. And the real estate division is the division that I run and founded. It was called Exeter before it was called EQT Exeter. And we have raised funds around the globe for the last almost 20 years, 17 and a half, that are very sector focused in a single asset class, and they're very geographically focused. So our largest asset class is industrial warehouse logistics types facilities. And then we do multifamily funds and we do office life science funds.
Fantastic. I've known Larissa for 30 years. I've known Ward for about 15. We kind of started our firms at the same time. EQT Exeter is a little bit bigger than our firm, but we've spent a lot of time together, and I've watched them grow. It's amazing how they've grown their organization and how large it's become and how much they've been able to serve their limited partners. So very honored to have Larissa and Ward here. Readings, everyone read the Sam Sell book. For those of you who are not in the class, today's reading is a set of excerpts from a book written by Sam Zell called Am I Being Too Subtle? For those of you who know of Sam Zell, who recently passed away, he is anything but subtle. A lot of meaningful opinions, and he built tremendous businesses, starting with Equity Investment Group, then Equity Office Properties, and then a whole host of businesses that had nothing to do with real estate at all. A true entrepreneur. And in his book, he talks a lot about entrepreneurship. And I think in those excerpts, we see how he thinks about a lot of topics, and particularly about real estate entrepreneurship. So what I thought we could do, just to kind of kick things off, is I went through the readings and picked a few of the different themes that he talked about. And I think these themes are universal to anyone that is an entrepreneur, and particularly an entrepreneur in the real estate space. We're joined today by two fantastic real estate entrepreneurs. So what better people to expound on these themes than Larissa and her buddy Ward? Fair enough? All right, cool. So the first point or theme that I saw was a line by Zell that said, being an entrepreneur is about how you think, not just what you do. Entrepreneurs are someone who sees solutions, not just problems. And so, Larissa, I think in this classroom, we have folks who are in law school, like you were not too long ago. Your move to get into real estate was somewhat entrepreneurial when you moved away from the law, first to Credit Suisse and Morgan Creek, and then to hang your own shingle at Oak Street, and which became Blue Owl. So you've kind of had two levels of entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm making the transition from being a lawyer into seating and then starting your own organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing what I'm going to say, Ward is going to have a very different answer to. So definitely, I
was going to say the reverse. Everything that Larissa says, I'm going to agree.
I don't think he will. So started as a lawyer, as Mike mentioned, honestly, I didn't realize Excel existed when we were in college. So definitely didn't know how to use it. I could use Word. So I would show all my banker friends how to work in Word, but wound up practicing at a large law firm for 5 years, went in-house at Credit Suisse with the idea that a lot of the lawyers there had moved over to the business side, but I was still focused on fundraising. They moved me over to do fundraising. They hired a guy to run real estate, and literally a week in, he asked me to move over to do real estate investing. It's like, that sounds terrifying. No, thank you. 3 weeks later, he was gone. And so Credit Suisse, large investment bank, said, he wanted you to do this, you're doing it now. I'm like, but I said, no, I didn't want to do it. And they're like, great, well, we hired someone to replace you. So figure it out or find a new job. So I figured it out and wound up loving it. So I think, again, really good example of I was scared, but other people knew I could do it and it was completely fine. And then went to Morgan Creek. But I never, ever had any inkling of wanting to be an entrepreneur. That was not something that drove me. Again, that's where I think Ward is going to be different. Did not want to at the most immediately prior firm. So I got moved over to the business side, started investing, loved it, made a few jumps. And then there were some, earmuffs Ward, there were some things going on at my prior firm that were not ideal. Ward is friends with the CIO. So it was not ideal. And a bunch of us left, and that kind of forced my hand. And suddenly I found myself as an entrepreneur. But one thing that was a very hard adjustment for me, especially as a lawyer, was I did not necessarily see solutions. I didn't necessarily see problems, but when I would talk to my business partners, they would be like, oh, well, let's just do it this way. I'm like, no, we can't do that. And my answer was always, no, we can't do that. And it took probably a year of my partner being like, we need to grow the business. Like, we have to have a business that works. Like, why do you keep saying no to things? And my nose would turn to yes, but my instant reaction was always no. And so that, I think, especially the lawyer in me, was a very hard path to entrepreneurship, because you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to be open to things and creative. And I think it's a fine line. You don't want the answer to always be yes. You don't want to be the person who's just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. but you have to be saying yes to things and seeing solutions. So I think that's a very interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like you became an entrepreneur in both by necessity, like
Yes.
lose your job or do this, and then, finding the right fit for you. Whereas Ward, you were at a prominent firm that you helped take public, a REIT, and I assume your career was going in a great direction. But you became an entrepreneur when you started Exeter. What was the genesis for that, or led to that?
Well, if I could for a moment, I'd like the class to tell us, either from Sam Zell or from themselves, Benjamin, what is an entrepreneur, or what does an entrepreneur do? Madeline Smith, what do you think an entrepreneur is or does?
I think an entrepreneur is someone with the mindset towards problem solving and towards thinking of our abilities to do.
Okay. Pamela Greer, what do you think an entrepreneur is or does?
I absolutely agree with that.
Okay. I'm not going to agree with any of you yet. Brent Niemeyer, what is an entrepreneur? What does an entrepreneur do? I'm sorry? Nope. Okay, kind of. Sophia, do you have a thought?
Everything. Somebody who is, I guess.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna suggest at least one definition of an entrepreneur is someone who's willing to take risk. I think that, to me, is the biggest definition of an entrepreneur. And that's what Larissa did when she started her business. It's what I did when I started my business. Larissa and I talked about the fact that, what was it like back when we started our businesses, and we were talking about the fact that we had to scrounge up. Larissa said I had to scrounge up $50,000. Didn't have it around. Had to use the expression beg, borrow, and steal. I started my business I'm a slow learner. So I started my business much after Larissa. She was always the top of the class. And I remember having 3 children and deciding that we were going to start this business called Exeter, and telling my wife that if this doesn't work, we're going to sell the house and take the 3 kids out of Catholic school. That's taking risk. And that's what Larissa did. That's what Mike O'Malley did, and with his partners. And that's what the partners at Exeter did. The other thing I just want to share with you is that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Everyone's not built for it. Everyone can be built for real estate, but everybody's not built for entrepreneurship. Obviously, today's session is about entrepreneurship, so we'll focus on that. But I don't want anybody to be sitting there saying, "Ooh, I'm not that big a risk taker," right? I don't know if real estate's for me. But I think that there are ways to think about the business that are both entrepreneurial. There are other parts that are transactional, other parts that are, I'll call it managerial, right, of sorts. And you'll learn about that today through Larissa and Mike and through the next bunch of weeks. As far as my own personal journey, again, actually, Larissa and Mike, as well as they know me, again, we don't, I'm too old for them to know my history as well, right? And I would say my history is not that different. I wasn't a big REIT. And what happened was my mentor, who's named Bill Rouse, who was a contemporary of Sam Zell's, he died of small cell lung cancer within about 9 months of being diagnosed in 2003, 20 years ago, this past June. I thought I was going to be the CEO of that company, major $10 billion publicly traded company. And he died, and the board had to name someone who was more progressed in their career. And I didn't get along with that guy. And because he was not an entrepreneur, and Mr. Rouse, like Mr. Zell, like Mike and Larissa, was an entrepreneur. And I didn't understand running a business without taking any risk. Because while there's lots of ways to make money, one of the ways to make significant amounts of money is you have to take risk. Everyone's looking for the the silver or whatever, the golden cloud or whatever you would call it. Is that, you don't make money generally by not taking risk. And again, what Larissa's proven and Mike and his firm have proven is that if you take risk that's well investigated, well thought out, you can take risk and make a lot of money in your investments for your for your client investors. And the one thing I will disagree with Mike on is no one ever at Exeter calls their investor clients LPs, because there's nothing limited about my partners. But anyway.
Well said, well said. I think Professor O'Malley needs to brush up on his entrepreneurial skills, because I think Professor Fitzgerald is about to take his position. Calling on people day one, I love it. So you are welcome anytime, Ward. No, I think one of the things that Sam Zell touched on is something that he called the radius theory of business. And I think this is so critical to entrepreneurship. And it's real simple. Your ability to succeed is ultimately limited by the number of people between you and the decision. And right, we're all going to see this early on in our career, when if you go into a multi-level organization, you might have an idea that gets to the final answer, but it's going to take a long time and it's going to go through a lot of folks. Oftentimes, what drives entrepreneurialism is folks say, you know what, I want to be making the decision. I want to drive a strategy or a vision or an idea in what my dream is. And so I just found that really, I'd never seen it mentioned so succinctly before. The more layers there are, the tougher it is to succeed. To Ward's point, you have to take risk. And so, you know, Larissa, when you were thinking about, particularly when you guys started Blue Owl, Oak Street, which was the predecessor company to Blue Owl, and you talked about it, like you had to come up with $50,000 to invest in your own fund. But you were 1 degree away from every decision. That's a big responsibility, particularly when you're investing other people's capital as well. But I know you very well. I know it's a responsibility you don't take lightly as well. What was that like the first time there was no one else to answer to and you were making the decision on an investment?
It's, I would say the investment was less scary because I'd been in roles where I was pulling the trigger and investing. What was terrifying in that moment was realizing that there are now employees and people who are depending on us. And if the business doesn't succeed, they are not going to have jobs. And they don't control it. That, you know, this was my 2 partners and I, and we're running the business. And so if we make a mistake, if we're not being thoughtful, that's going to have a negative impact on them that they're not controlling. And so that still to this day, you know, even as we merged with Blue Owl, it was still like, how is this going to impact our employees? This is not what they signed up for. And so that's, you know, that was the terrifying part to me, was that folks were relying on us to make those decisions.
Yeah, you had responsibility, you had families, and yeah. There's nothing that makes you really understand your responsibility more than when you have like a Christmas party or a holiday party and you see all the folks that are depending on what goes on in that office every day of the year. You see them once a year, but you know, it really is and that's what drives a lot of entrepreneurs, is the ability, you know, and that of fear as well. Like, I know I was talking to one of my former students this morning. My first 5 years were driven out of fear. Just we got to build this business. We got to grow it.
Yeah. And the flip side is then it's so fun. I mean, seeing those same employees when you've done well and they have now done better than they ever anticipated, as you have, and like seeing how excited they are and knowing that, you know, they've contributed so much, like that's great when it works, but we're here because it worked. Everyone on CNBC is there because it worked. It's really hard and scary to get to that point, and you never have people come in to class or to CNBC who are failed entrepreneurs, right? Who lost everything and all of their employees, you know, lost their jobs. So you don't ever hear that side of it.
Doesn't make for good TV.
No.
Yeah. Ward, when you guys were starting Exeter, did anyone tell you guys it was a bad idea, or why are you doing this, or all the roadblocks that you'd run into?
There were definitely some people who said, Ward, like he can't do that. He won't succeed. I think that the answer is yes. I mean, I would say that, again, without being too cute, you know, my stature in the industry wasn't such that people even know we started our own business. So there wasn't a lot of people opining on whether we should or shouldn't. We started with 6 people and we started with a few dollars, and as Larissa and Mike did. And so the idea of would we be successful? I think most people assume we would not. Certainly, and no one who I was in class with here at Notre Dame would have imagined that I could have built a business the way that we did. But I think again, to some of the things that have been said, is that, Bill Rouse said to me, and again, I don't know if you read the book in this class, but Bill and his uncle Jim started the Rouse Company. There's a great book to read called Better Places, Better Lives. And again, Dan and Mike spoke at the preamble to the class today, that real estate investing, you not only have responsibility to your investor clients, but you have responsibility to those people that use your buildings. You have responsibility to the communities your buildings are in. And if you do build and buy and create better places, hopefully you will create better lives. But what Bill Rouse said to me, when he was alive was, if you really want to succeed at something, you have to think about being on a pirate ship and going out on the plank and going so far out on the plank that you can't go back, right? You can't go back. Because if you give yourself a back door, human nature is that you'll take it. Because there's a certain amount of tolerance. While I talked about risk earlier, there's a certain amount of tolerance that we all have towards risk, right? Even though people that are, I'll call it foolishly risky, as an example, may not risk their lives, right? Would they put themselves in a situation where they could die in order to succeed? Obviously, military people do that take their roles and responsibilities that are far graver than ours as business entrepreneurs. But if you think about putting yourself in a situation that you can't go back, you can't change your mind. And one of the things Larissa and Mike both alluded to is when you take on the responsibility of other people, right? As soon as you take on the responsibility of other people, then you really are in a situation where you can't go back, because you've asked people to join the team. You've asked people to join the squad. Think about Marcus Freeman, right? He's recruited a bunch of high school kids to come play for Notre Dame. He not only has an obligation to Father John, to the professor's administration, and to the alumni, but he has responsibility to those young men and their families to put them in a situation to succeed. And he can't decide, I'm not going to put my heart and soul into this. But now that he's the head coach, and probably I'm sure when he was a defensive coordinator, he said, I have to give everything I have. I promise these people, if they join me, we would succeed. And what you learn as a leader in entrepreneurial organizations is that, and again, I've watched Larissa and Mike and their partners, is that, you do carry the world on your shoulders, because all of these persons and professionals and families are counting on the system to succeed. But the system is you. You are the system. So when you think about having to take on that responsibility, they're the things you think of when you embark on this endeavor.
It's a great point. And I don't want to gloss over a point that Ward made when he talked about starting Exeter. You had 3 young children in Catholic school. I'm looking around, I see some other entrepreneurs in the group. There is never an opportune time to start a business. There's never going to be a time where the idea strikes you right after you get your year-end bonus and you have time. That's not going to happen. We started Pennybacker, and the market literally the stock market went down 50% in 2008, right when we started. I was like, well, I'm halfway in. I might as well get all the way in. And so that is one thing that I think people fail to realize sometimes is ultimately your passion is going to tell you when the right time is to start a business, or opportunity set is going to come across, but it's never going to be perfectly timed.
Or the Holy Spirit.
Or the Holy Spirit. That's a great point.
Providence will come your way, as it did in the case of Bill Rouse dying, or in the case of Larissa being in an organization where the leader of the organization was not the best leader of an organization. And when those things become apparent to you, I always say the Holy Spirit drops the breadcrumbs. You just have to know which breadcrumbs to follow and make sure they're the Holy Spirit's breadcrumbs and not somebody else's breadcrumbs. But that is often what happens.
And it actually is a great point. I mean, I would say the best things that have ever happened to me, including Notre Dame, where I wanted to go to Georgetown forever, got deferred early, applied to Notre Dame. Can't imagine life otherwise. But I mean, Credit Suisse, that was something I did not want to have happen. In the moment, it was horrible. Prior firm having to leave that, I loved it. And then it became horrible. And it was so upsetting. Ward's mentor dying. These are things that in the moment were absolutely horrible. And you're like, why is this happening to me? This is the worst. They were actually the best things that could have ever happened to us. And so I think that's important to remember throughout your career is when seemingly bad things happen, you can either stew on it and make it a worse negative, or you can really figure out what's going on and turn it into a positive.
Sometimes it's a kick in the backside to get going.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So another thing that Sam Zell said, and he says it very succinctly, culture is king. And in particular, what he tries to do is establish a meritocracy, or what he tried to do at his firms is establish a meritocracy, where people are measured not by how well they played the political game within the actual organization, but by what they produce. I know I love that when I saw that, and I know both of you guys. I know you care a lot about your teams and your firms. You also care about having high performers at your firms. And if so, it doesn't matter what age they are, if they're doing the job, they're gonna get the opportunity set. That quote really hit me, and it makes a lot of sense on the meritocracy side. At Blue Owl, how do you think about that? Like, I know Krista Kerr is a great example, an employee that you hired very early, and now she's a managing director, I think.
Yeah. So I completely agree with it. And I think a knock that I would put on large public companies is that meritocracy is harder. So when we were a small firm, if I wanted to promote someone, they got promoted yesterday. Blue Owl, we have very rigid, you have to have X years of experience, you have to have been in this title for X years. And so from a comp perspective, it is a meritocracy, and the revenue you generate is going to determine how much you get paid. But that is actually a better, I think, a plug for smaller firms is that meritocracy. That's how the small firms survive and thrive. And so they really need to reward outperformers. It's harder at more rigid, the larger the firm becomes, the more rigid your rules have to be because there's just so many employees. But I 100% agree with the concept.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's the same at Exeter, that if you're performing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the lessons again that I learned, I don't have any good ideas myself. I've just been pretty good at following the directorship of the Providence been put in front of me. There's a man that you all might know or you'll hear about in your readings. His name is Tremel Crow. He was also a contemporary of Sam Zell's and a contemporary of Bill Rouse's and Jim Rouse's. And Tremel Crow, back when I was in graduate school, I think it's Fortune or Forbes has this thing like the 10 most admired companies to work for in the world or whatever. And Tremel Crow was on that list every year I was in graduate school. And their model was one where they took graduates of the best business schools. So think about a Stanford MBA or a Northwestern or Chicago MBA or a Wharton MBA, and they paid them $24,000 a year. And people were flocking to go to that company. And you say, why? It's because he created one of the greatest meritocracies in real estate. And one of the things that was the highlight of some of the articles in Fortune is at the time, he had made more persons millionaires than any company had in the history of corporate America. And so persons wanted to flock there. And so again, when Larissa talks about being able to give out, being in an organization that can reward those people for the performance and production that they are able to create, it's really important. Now, the one thing I also have to say, and again, I don't want to be called a little rain on the parade, is that for young people, one of the biggest problems is creating patience, because there's a lot of young people that come into organizations that really don't have the ability to create a great deal of value. So you have to put yourself in a situation to learn the industry before you try to perform in the industry. And I think that's another, again, my son graduated here 2 years ago, and he's in the real estate business. And one of the things I continue to preach to him is that, you can't be the biggest deal maker in the company. You just can't. There's not anything about you because you're just too young, right? It may be different if you can create an algorithm that, creates an iPhone or creates a Microsoft or an Intel chip. But effectively in this industry, it does take some time to understand what's going on in order to be in that position to be in a meritocracy.
Yeah, it's a great point. Here, show of hands, who thinks one day they don't want to work for salary and bonus and maybe want to run their own organization in some way? We got some folks. I think there are so many different levels of entrepreneurship too, even in real estate. Let me give you an example. I remember my 5th year out of Notre Dame. I had just gotten a raise. I was pretty happy about it. And I talked to a friend who left to become a broker at JLL. What was not JLL at the time, but became JLL. So we were having beers. I said, what are you going to make there? And he's like, well, I make zero. They don't pay me. I get paid for what I produce. I was like, what? That seems crazy. And he's like, yeah, but you learn the business. So 6 months later, we get together. He had signed his first deal. He made more on that deal than I was going to make all year. And he still had another 6 months of the year left. He became an entrepreneur. He was running his own P&L, if you will, within an organization. This is one thing that real estate really allows you to do in multiple levels, is be an entrepreneur in different elements and different, segments of the industry. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship today, Larissa and Ward and myself, we had all started firms, but there are plenty of entrepreneurs where every day when they wake up, they have no salary or bonus or benefits coming in, and they have 3 kids in school, private school as well, and they hustle and figure it out. And so there's so many different elements. Don't think you have to put a shingle on a wall and come up with a company name to be in a cool logo, which none of us have really figured out how to do that very well, to be an entrepreneur. There's so many ways to be an entrepreneur.
I got a super cool logo, by the way.
Ward's got a cool logo. Yeah.
We have an owl.
Ours is a bridge.
Mark
Yeah.
the monstrance. Just
Yeah. Ward's is cool. I did just think of that as I said it. So, all right. Another thing that, any questions? Anyone have any ideas, any thoughts, anything they want to bring up right now?
Yes, thank you. I want to ask you all, what drove you to join the industry or actually become part of it as asset managers and fund managers, as opposed to like a real estate holding company? A typical idea of entrepreneurs, money, use their own money, start a company. You don't see much of that unless you're operating at high level, like all of all you here. But starting an asset manager, dealing with the finance that you deal with. Can you expand on why you joined that and did it to anything else?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I would say a couple things. First off, Dan and Mike started the class again by talking about the industry. Real estate is the largest asset class in the world. The reason it is so capital intensive, right? So one of the things that makes it difficult today to compete in the way that you think about, and I'll get to it in 10 seconds here, is that there's so many large corporations that have such large balance sheets or have such big funds to compete with as an individual entrepreneur. Now, when I got into the business, and this is a really long story that I'll try to make it a really short story, but when I got into the business was before the most recent crisis that we know really well is the global financial crisis. The one that was 15 years before that was called the RTC, or Resolution Trust Corporation crisis. And before that, nobody had a fund. There wasn't any funds in the entire industry. There wasn't private equity real estate. It didn't exist until about 1994. And the only entrepreneurs were those entrepreneurs that borrowed money from a bank or a life insurance company or pension fund, put in their own capital and built a building. Okay, you can do that. There are still players that do that. The problem is they can't hold assets very long because they don't have a big enough balance sheet personally or even within their partnership to hold assets. Again, firms in our industry, meaning the logistics or industrial industry predominantly, are a company like Panettone, Carl Panettone out of California, and there's other like that. They call them merchant builders. The reason they do, again, is they use their own money, they borrow money, they build a building, but they can't hold it and build another building until they sell the first one. So that's why they're called merchant builders. But I'd say that I think that the biggest reason why a lot of organizations are formed in an investment management or asset management model compared to 30 years ago is because the industry is so capital intensive, and it's too difficult for entrepreneurs to get into the industry as a direct owner of real estate.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Great answer. Which it is a capital intensive business. And it's not just that you have to buy the building, you actually have to improve it and lease it and drive the business plan of the building so that you can make money for your investors. One of the things that Sam Zell mentioned in his book was he had an employee who had been with him for 20 years. and enjoyed it, got hired away at another firm who was going to give him a better title and a 50% raise. And a year later, that guy came back and said, I want my old job back. Sam Sell said, why? Why do you, it seems like you had a pretty good deal. Why are you coming back? And he said, because decisions were so difficult there. At Sam Zell's company, I think he was working for Equity Investment Group, decisions were made very quickly. Fast decisions lead to fast business plan implementation, which lead to ability to generate returns for your investors. And he said that fast decision-making from management is like oxygen to some of the employees. They crave it. It's more important than making a lot of money and going through a very long process to make a decision. And I imagine Larissa had not Credit Suisse or Clifford Chance, big organizations. I was at Ernst & Young. Decision-making, if you were even involved with it, took a long time sometimes.
It was, I mean, so actually to put it in context, Clifford Chance, right? Lawyers are notoriously horrible at running a business, but it has to be, right? You have to be responsive to the clients. Credit Suisse was pretty entrepreneurial at the time. It obviously didn't work out well in the end. I then went to Franklin Templeton, and I assumed big company is a big company is a big company. It was the worst. I mean, it was the worst place to work. They could not make decisions. Nothing happened. And as a result, no one worked. Like, it was just, so I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think you have to be careful, right? Fast decision-making, it still needs to be a well thought out, well-informed decision. You know, so fast is not always better, but you don't want decisions being dragged out. You don't want lack of communication. You need to take a position and execute on it.
Yeah.
I apologize. Jonathan was the only one to ask the question. Is there anybody else that had a question or comment they'd like to make, either something they're confused about or just something like to know about?
Oh, a lot. Thank you.
It's easier to teach the class when you're not teaching the class.
I love this. You can come to all my classes, Ward. This works out.
Yes.
You want to see us cry? Is that where we're going with this? I mean, it's taken years of therapy.
Let me repeat the question for those listening. Mr. Vallis's question was the fundraising process. When you're raising a fund, that is a difficult process. It takes a unique set of skills. Larissa, one time you told me the people who raise the most money aren't necessarily the best investors.
100%.
It's because sometimes they're just really good at raising money. And so that was kind of the question. And talk a little bit about the fundraising process, because frankly, every fund that you start, that's a new entrepreneurial venture to a large degree. And Larissa's great at raising capital.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it is it's why we have a business. It is the hardest part of real estate or any other entrepreneur. I mean, getting someone to believe in what you're doing when you have nothing. You know, we've all worked in the industry. You can show they're like, hey, these people like me. I have good references. I've done these deals. I seem to be decently smart. I seem to know what I'm talking about. But when you're starting something, you don't have any concrete proof. And so getting someone to give you money, and in private equity, obviously that's a 7 to 10 year commitment. That's not just like, oh, great, go buy that building over there, and in 6 months I'll have the results. It's really, really hard. And today it's impossible. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago is thankfully a little bit easier. But it's really hard.
You can just explain that part of the process, like when someone is thinking about going with you, they always have alternatives, like what kind of rate are they doing, like what is the whole game thing they set up, like what is it?
Yeah, so yes, so great point. So fundraising, right? So there are a few different buckets this can fall into. Is first, obviously it costs money to run a business. So depending on the situation, you might need to take in money just to buy computers and set up your infrastructure and actually have a business that can go out and execute on what you're talking to. And so there's kind of what we would call working capital, seed capital, where you're typically having to give up a lot, some ownership in your business, because that's very risky. If your business doesn't work, that money's gone and your investor is never going to get that money back. And then there's the capital that you need to raise once you have your business going. Say, okay, we're going to go out and buy $100 million of Amazon warehouses. And so you need to find that $100 million. And there you have to convince someone, why is this a good idea? Why should you trust me? Why is my team the best to execute on this? Because there are dozens, if not hundreds of people out there buying Amazon warehouses. So why are you going to be able to be better at it? Why are you going to get to a better return on that capital than anyone else who's out there? And unfortunately, there are 2,000 plus groups right now trying to raise capital for a real estate idea. And some ideas are more unique than others, but at the end of the day, that's a lot of people running around asking for money and trying to raise those dollars. And so it is very challenging. And once you've done it and you have fund one and you can say, hey, look, we did this, we've sold a lot of the assets, we got our investors a great return. Now it's still hard, but it's going to be easier to go out and say, okay, now we want to do this again. You should give us money. And so the more you're doing it, and the more you can show proof of concept in a fully baked story, the easier it's going to be. But right now, I mean, all of us have had very successful track records. It's so hard to raise money right now because of the economic environment. So it is never easy. It requires so much patience. But at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships. And, you need to find that person who's going to take a bet on you. And that's, again, regardless of whether it's real estate or anything else, that's the most important component in my mind. Other investors might disagree and say, nope, I just want to own that piece of real estate. But I think the relationship is what really differentiates it.
Well, again, one thing I don't want, from my perspective, don't want people to be confused about Larissa's comment, is that nobody gives you money because you're their friend, but they do because they like you, right? So Larissa raised, Michael raised with our colleagues a lot of capital over the last 15 plus years, but I knew none of the people. Okay. And I presume they knew few, if any, of the people they raised capital from. So don't be confused about what relationship means. Relationship means, in this context, it means that you demonstrate that you care and that you really do care, because they know the difference. They see hundreds of people come in their offices. The second thing is, and if you don't care, by the way, if you don't take your responsibility to those investor clients and their constituents, right? We talk a lot about, and the industry's transformed, and I will say, under the leadership of people like that are standing in front of you, right? Because there's vernacular, right? There's nomenclature in an industry that changes over time. And 15 years ago, people would talk about the New York State teachers' retirement system, and they talked about it as an institution, right? Now we've actually, when you bring not only what I call investment prowess, but you maybe bring the culture of Notre Dame and other people like us that maybe did come from other schools, probably not Georgetown since it's not Catholic anymore, but I'm just kidding. My dad went there, just saying, is that now we talk about the teachers, right? We talk about the police and fire of the Ohio system that we represent, or we talk about the fire and police in San Antonio, or the civil employees, civic employees of the state of New Mexico. And if you think about people that are retired, that are on a fixed income, okay, oil prices and gas prices are going up, food prices are going up, housing costs are going up, mortgage rates are going up, right? Rental rates are going up. If you don't care about that, then you shouldn't be in the institutional investment business. If you don't care to do better for those people, right? You have to want to care. You have to care. And then if you can demonstrate that care with some capability, which Larissa just shared with you, then you build a relationship and they want to give you money. The second side of it, I never, at the time, 15, 16, 17 years ago, and again, Larissa said it as well or better than anyone, since she's a great communicator, is that when you ask questions like that, it does want to bring us to tears, right? Literal to tears. If I could tell you the nights that, that of anguish that we have gone through to raise capital 15 years ago, you probably couldn't understand it. I threatened to burn one of my partner's houses down with his kids in it if he didn't do something that was going to make sure that we succeeded, because we had so many families relying on us. And this person was walking backward on the plank. I literally called him up and said, I will burn your house down with your wife and children in it if you don't change your mind. Okay? That's how we got the fire. Michael Jordan talked about the fact that after he had won a couple NBA championships in his documentary, that he used to project on his opponent something so that he could hate his opponent. And it was his mechanism from which to rally. And candidly, I found myself, again, I look back on it, and again, I'm not the GOAT like Michael Jordan is, but basically, well, Will Chamberlain's the GOAT, but we're not going there either.
Oh,
but
Philly, that's Philly talking.
You just check the record books, check the record books. Is that Vegas just doesn't have a press relations guy. Yeah, but anyway, is that when you project on your competitor that's this thing that you disdain, and then you can project it in these fundraising meetings, right? And that doesn't mean I walked around saying I hate this company or I hate this company, but you have to have a context of hating the competition, because as Larissa said, there's 2,000 other firms going in to see the New York State teachers to say, I'm going to invest your money well. And if you don't have the drive and determination in you to basically decide I have to win at all costs, not unethically, but you have to say to yourself, I'm competing against these firms, right? And be able to differentiate yourself, maybe, as I've already described, through relationship, also through capability, right? But maybe there is a specific differentiation in your business that you can highlight that's important to that investor. And then to project that in that scene, it's really important.
And to do it, obviously, though, and what's really hard about that is to do it in a classy way, right? Where you're not actually putting down your competitor, but you are quietly advocating and showing why you are so much better.
Yes.
And why that investor would be a moron to put money with the other group. And then sometimes they still do, and you want to kill yourself or like call them and be like, are you a freaking idiot? Like, what are you even thinking? And you can't do that either. You have to be really nice and gracious and say, okay, thank you, because life is long. And so hopefully they're going to see the error of their ways. They usually do. And hopefully they'll be back around to you the next time. But
I've always thought the iPhone should have like a 5-second delay, because you pick up the phone, you want to call someone, just a cooling off period a little bit.
There are apps.
I should probably get that.
Yeah.
So quick follow-up to Katie's question.
Yep.
And we're going to rapid fire. Just can you explain, like, you talk about the finishing point, but like, like the Notre Dame, like university, like who are these players? Like Southwell, who are these players? Obviously, the folks in the Notre Dame endowment, they're trying to do good for our students, their faculty. Like, that's who they care about.
Yeah. So basically there are, as Ward mentioned, police, fire, teachers, all of those pensions have, big corpuses that get invested so that they are hitting their returns and they can continue paying out capital. The Notre Dame endowment, same thing, right? When you make a donation to Notre Dame, it goes into the endowment that is used to, a portion of that, probably I think 5%, it gets paid out every year to help run the university. And then, but otherwise it needs to exist to run the university. Sovereign wealth funds, government of Singapore, really the same concept, but for those countries as a whole. And then there are also family offices, very wealthy individuals who can write checks as well. There are increasingly a lot of advisors who will pool, very high net worth or super high net worth individuals. A bunch of them are focused on athletes and pooling athletes' capital and investing that. So there is on the one hand endless money, but there are endless demands on that money. And
I would just say too, just again, for those of you who are have some rudimentary understanding, you can think about these buckets, or as Larissa used the word corpus, which is the principal amount. no different than, I'll call it the $1,000 that you or maybe your parents might have in the bank. And what do you do with it? You buy some stocks, you buy some bonds, you buy some other stuff to invest your capital. The way the institutional investment world has gone, and it was actually, I don't want to be too favorable to this institution, though, is that Yale University CIO created a new investment model, about, again, 40 years ago. And in that model, it suggested that more capital should be in the private markets than was at the time. And so where the whole concept was, you put 70% of your money into stock market, you put 20% of your money into bonds, and 10% into other. He suggested that a minimum of a third should be in other, because these organizations that, unlike a family who might have 10,000 in the bank or 100,000 in the bank, that these institutions have large amounts of capital. They don't need to spend the capital. It's not for their reserve for a rainy day. It's generational. And so if you have that capital and you can put it into private investments, you should get paid a premium for being in the private investments because you don't have liquidity like the stock market. However, by doing that, they could outperform their peers. And he proved it to be true. So today, most of these groups have about a third, most of the endowments like Notre Dame or the New York State teachers or the government of Singapore that Larissa is referring to. And if you look at that third, about a third of that, okay, so about a little bit less than a sixth goes into real estate. And the other pieces go into either what they would call private equity buyout, venture capital, infrastructure, or some other things.
More should go to real estate.
Okay. More should go into real estate first. As a matter of fact, Larissa and I, we do this once in a while together, is that 51% of the world's assets are in real estate. So generally, we believe 50% of their capital should be in real estate if it was tied to the asset value across the globe. It's not only about 12-ish to 14% is. And so, and then of those different organizations, a lot of them invest into funds. But as Jonathan kind of highlighted, some of them don't. Some want to invest with a company who just wants to direct invest in real estate, and they'll participate in that. As an example, the National Pension Service of Korea does invest in some funds, but they like to buy buildings. And so they would prefer that they get a manager that does not have an investment management fund or an asset management business, that they would just help them buy buildings. And can we ask for some more questions? Because we only got two.
So, another question of mine was, so when you guys do those funding and those collaboration, how do you take your stance where you attract investors? You mentioned there's a lot of big players in the team or people in the industry. How do you attract the investors so that they invest?
It's hard. It's hard. I think you have to know what you're very good at and tell a very, create a really good story and narrative around your experience, what you're good at. If you have spent 10 years owning Winnebago parks throughout the country, that's something you're going to want to really focus on, and you're going to want to stick to that and be able to show why you're good at executing on Winnebago parks versus just building student housing. But you also then need to understand your competition and who else is doing it and what differentiates you. Why are you better? But honestly, sometimes it's hard. Apartments, right? There's endless apartments. There are probably 300 groups that are raising money to buy apartment buildings. They all come in. They have all, they're adding washer dryers, they're adding dog parks, and it is really hard to distinguish and say, okay, I like this group, but not this group because they all do the same thing. And so you really have to be creative with an angle and coming up with some edge to get people to buy into what you're doing versus everyone else, especially when you're small and new.
And I think that, again, Larissa used a great expression in specialization, right? I think that a lot of us, or a lot of you all, it's a big world you're exposed to, is that you can't conquer it all at once, right? So, when we started, we said, we're a real estate, value add opportunity fund. What do? We buy warehouses between Boston and Philadelphia. That's all we do. Really. So we're the best at it because there's a lot of other firms that are doing it across the country. There's a lot of other firms that are doing it across the world. What else do you do special? Well, we know how to build buildings. Some people just know how to buy buildings. We build a lot of the buildings. So 50% of the investments that go into our fund are new developments, as opposed to some of our peers, 100% of their investments are acquisitions and none of them are developments. And I won't get into too much of it, but there's times when it makes sense to build a building because it's cheaper than buying. And sometimes there's times where it's cheaper to buy than to build, which today is, by the way, the case. And I don't want to speak for Michael, but I think I remember that when they started, they decided they were only going to invest in Texas. And that was the story. And if, you know, Texas is big, but he and his partners were not trying to compete with firms that had national presence or international presence. And the way you get your foot in the door and you get the initial capital to say, I can make you money in Texas and I'm better at it than anybody in Texas. And that's a winning formula.
That was our pitch.
Yeah.
Big part of it.
So going back to the fundraising question, you know, you also just have to have thick skin, because for every investor that's going to be like, this is fantastic, I want to be investing in Texas, you're going to have equally as many, if not 10 times more, saying, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, I need something. I'm only making one investment this year. Texas is too focused. So you just have to stay true to yourself, know what you're good at and say, okay, well, thanks. Like, maybe next time you'll be more interested in Texas and come back around.
What you can't say is, well, we can go outside of Texas if you want, because then you have strategy drift.
Right.
How many people in here know Father Michael Schmitz? Bible in a year. It's a priest that's been doing podcasts. You guys should all listen to him. They're 15 minutes a day. But he talked about the Trappist and the Saint Bruno, who his motto is Nunc Cepe. And that's what we have to do. Nunc Cepe means to start again. Now, he talked about it as relates to sin. You sin, you don't give up just because you sin. Say, I'm sinful. You say, tomorrow, I'm going to try not to sin. Nunc Cepe, right? When you're fundraising, that's all you can say. I failed yesterday. I'm starting again. Nunc Cepe. So that like when Larissa says you can have a thick skin, I mean, you can go home at night and cry, which we did, okay? And our family saw us cry, but you got to back on the field the next day and play. And that's the way that you succeed.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. So what I want to do is some rapid fire questions that our panelists don't know are coming. And I want you guys just to give you a couple of ideas, both of you, on each of these topics. Fair enough? All right. Ward, I'll start with you. Leverage.
Leverage. In 1989, everybody borrowed 110 or 120%, which is why we had the RTC crisis. There was no equity in the system. Leverage is an important thing. Do not buy buildings with negative leverage ever.
And I would say leverage is, like, my immediate word was bad, right? It's, you don't want to financially engineer your asset. If you cannot get to a return on an unlevered basis by actually adding value to the real estate, you shouldn't be buying the asset. And so leverage can help your returns a little bit, but you need to be very careful about the risk that you're taking by adding that leverage to
You can torpedo your returns as well.
Yes.
All right, right back to you, Larissa. Office buildings.
So I like office buildings.
Today, 2023.
Today, I do not like generic office buildings. I would not want to own a 1 million square foot office building. I would not want to own the Willis Tower. I'm going to be super curious to see how Blackstone escapes that one. But we own some office in Texas. We own some office in New York City, small floor plate. Firms are always going to exist. People, I believe, need to be in the office. And so I think if you are looking for a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot tenant and have an office building that's pretty and in a well located, you can do very well. And right now, everyone hates office. So you're seeing fantastic deals on the buy side, and you can still lease up those office assets very easily. So I am a big fan of office, but I realize it's completely contrarian and most people run screaming from the room.
Which is why I asked you. Ward?
Well, I back starting again when I started my career, I probably, when we started Exeter, had built more office buildings than warehouses. And right now, I would say about 1/3 of the office buildings in the United States will not be office buildings in a decade or more. I also think that there is opportunities, but you have to understand, one of the things that we talk a lot about at Exeter and the other, firms that are successful that understand is investing is about the user, the person who pays the revenue. And so it's what corporations want. It's what corporations need. Make sure before you buy an office building today, you understand what corporations would be interested in it. The last thing I'll say in office is that the biggest problem with office right now is middle-aged professionals and older professionals are the ones that don't want to go back to the office.
Yeah, and usually you hear that's the opposite. It's the young folks. Young folks generally want to go to the offices. Ward, right back to you. Affordable housing.
I think it's critical. The biggest problem in housing is that cities do not give out permits quickly enough. They complain that that the rents are too high, that people can't afford to live, that we have a housing crisis. We have about 5 million dwelling units short in the United States right now. We can't solve that problem by just saying, oh, let's find cheaper ways to build buildings. It's simple economics, supply and demand. We don't have enough supply, and only the mayors and the township managers and the governments of the United States can solve the problem.
Larissa?
It's such a problem because on the one hand, towards point, like it is a huge problem. We need more housing. From the perspective of what we do, however, as fiduciaries and stewards of capital, we have to maximize the return to our investors. And so not raising rents when you can, because you feel badly about people not being able to afford it is not okay. It's not what we are tasked with doing. And so there needs to be a solution, but I don't even want to start down that rabbit hole on what it looks like, but I think it's a very hard situation.
Larissa said earlier, they don't put failures on CNBC. Go look it up on the internet. And about a month ago, Ward was on CNBC talking about affordable housing. So that was a little bit of a loaded question, and certainly not a failure. Okay, next question. Larissa, FIRE, Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate.
Overrated.
No, underrated. I mean, first of all, it's been amazing, right? I think we went in expecting like 30 students the first year, and we're over
450, not including freshmen.
Yeah, so I think it's fantastic. I think real estate, there's so much you can do. Whether you're a law student, there's just so many different angles. Obviously, a great team. So I think it's fantastic, and you should real estate's the best. You should take as many real estate classes as you can.
Yeah, I would say again, Larissa's right, is that, again, whether you're in a science major and you're talking about new materials to build buildings with, if you're into sustainability and the energy transition in this country, the greatest use of resources in the world is real estate. It takes the most because there's so much construction. It takes the most because to operate it, and then actually takes the most because there's a lot of decommissioning that goes on. So, whether you're concerned about being a finance investment entrepreneur or whether or not you're worried about climate change, real estate is the place where you can have the greatest impact on the world.
Okay, we're going to go to a couple of theme related questions. Kelly Green jerseys. Larissa.
I am still biased to be scared by them because we never play well. It's like they have butter on them or something.
Not a big fan. Ward?
I like the fans in Kelly Green.
Okay.
Team.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent. I think that it's not the jersey they're wearing. It's good fun.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so Kelly Green jerseys to another favorite topic. Brian Kelly.
Hate him.
Oh my God.
I mean, that's easy.
My family can tell you the day he showed up on campus, the very first day, I didn't like Brian Kelly. As a matter of fact, some of us have a good mutual friend who told me about 7 years ago. He said, Ward, I don't know if you know this, but I have dinner at Brian Kelly's house every Thursday night before a home football game. And you and I have become such good friends that I want to invite you to Brian Kelly's basement to have a steak and a bottle of wine. And I thought, wow, how super cool would that be to be with the head football coach at his house the night before a big game against USC or Ohio State and to hear about the strategy and talk about it. And I said to the man, I said, Joe, I apologize. I cannot accept your invitation. I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the history of the world. And I refused to go because I knew Brian Kelly was a bad apple.
This one was a huge Kelly sympathist. The biggest fights in our relationship have been over Brian.
5, 10 win seasons in a row is hard to do. So I was a big fan. Okay. Last question on that theme. Faculty director, national championships are important. I'm glad Dan spoke up as the last one on this theme as faculty director, Dan Kelly. Thoughts? Awesome. Ward.
Okay, so I gotta tell another story. You're actually-
Yeah, I know this.
we were in Dublin for the game, and we were walking down the street. Dan was with his wife, I was with my son, and we ran into the ex-provost, Tom Burrish is his name, for those of you know, the prior provost. And we said hello to Tom, and I said, Tom, I said to my son, this is Tom Burrish, the ex-provost, he's a genius. And Tom said, no. I said, no, Tom's a genius. I said, when we started the Real Estate Institute, I said, the one thing I thought was important is that it wasn't only in the business college, that it was a university institute. So we only couldn't get business majors in, but could get a science major or an econ major or whatever. And so I said, we're not putting in the business college. He said, okay, I want this guy, Dan Kelly, to run the program. I said, the only thing worse than being in the business college is to have a lawyer run the real estate program. And he said, I promise you he's good. I said, let's look for somebody else. So Dan was gracious enough to go through the exercise of 6 months of interviewing people. And at the end of the process, we realized that Dan Kelly was the greatest leader of any institute or any college at the University of Notre Dame or at any college in the world.
And the proof is in the pudding.
And the proof is in the pudding.
Amen to that. I would like to thank our two guests for being here. I thought they did an awesome job. So, as Professor Kelly said, we've got refreshments just outside on the southeast corner. Feel free to stop by. I think Ward and Larissa will be there for a little bit. Otherwise, we will see you guys next week. Thanks, everybody.